Hi, I'm Mo Davis. I'm the Democratic candidate running in North Carolina's 11th Congressional District and hoping to represent you in Western North Carolina in the 117th Congress when it convenes in January of next year. I wished we could be together in person this year to celebrate Earth Day, but the circumstances have intervened and we're not able to do that. So I appreciate the opportunity to get to talk with you a little bit by video, and hopefully next year that maybe we can do this in person, and hopefully we'll have a better news that by this time next year we'll have a new administration that's more concerned about the environment and about people than the current administration. So thank you. I mean, obviously the environment is important to you. You wouldn't be watching right now. So thank you to all the folks in the Western North Carolina Climate Action Coalition for your efforts to take care of the beauty that surrounds us here in Western North Carolina. I can tell you, having grown up in North Carolina, it is something I took for granted growing up here, and I left to serve the military. I served for 25 years in the Air Force, and I think one of the things that I learned from that was to appreciate how fortunate we are to live here in these beautiful mountains. You know, when you live here, you tend to take it for granted, and you see other parts of the world, and you realize just how fortunate we are to be here in the Blue Ridge. You know, when I served in the military has long recognized for decades that the climate is changing, and that climate change poses challenges both at home and abroad. I joined the military back in the 1980s, and even back then, part of our contingency plannings for national security, our security priorities, included addressing the effects of climate change that was on the horizon. You know, with climate change and things like sea level rise and crop disruptions, you also get population displacement, and that poses a threat to our national security as large numbers of people are impacted adversely by climate change. And so the military for decades has included in their contingency planning plans to respond to the national security threats that climate change poses. I know often people think of the military, particularly progressives, tend to think of the military as not very forward-leaning and forward-thinking, but in the area of climate and the environment, at least since the 80s when I joined, it has been a high priority on the military side. I was in the JAG Corps. I'm an attorney, and as far back as the 80s, the JAG Corps, Air Force JAG Corps, sends 15 or 20 attorneys per year back to school to get a master's of law. I went back and got a master's of law in government procurement and fiscal policy. But the biggest area where we send the most folks were to get masters of law in environmental law, because the military recognized and the Air Force recognized that that's a current issue and an issue for the future, and that we need to have the resources to be able to respond. The military also recognized the harm that the military had done to the environment, I think often through ignorance, but over the years we had done a lot of damage. And so I was personally involved in some of the remediation efforts to do what we can to restore the damage that we had done in the past, and to be better stewards of the environment going forward. One of the reasons I'm running for Congress is I think we've got to do a better job of taking care of Western North Carolina. As you know, I'm sure you're well aware that on the Republican side, there's been an effort to roll back environmental regulations. Just in the past week, the Trump administration has rolled back regulations on mercury. And certainly if you're in the Asheville area and you followed what's taking place with the Duke Power Plant, coal ash disposal is a big issue of concern, and one of those concerns is the mercury that's a byproduct, as well as things like lead and arsenic. But the Trump administration is rolling back the standards, and I guess that's what you would come to expect when the head of the EPA is a former coal company lobbyist. we've got to do a better job. We've had the benefit of living in this beautiful area. We need to protect it and preserve it for future generations so they can do the same. So when I'm elected to Congress and I'm representing this area, I'll do my best to try to reverse this trend that we've been on of rolling back regulations and doing harm to the environment, and get us back on the right track, back into the Paris Accords, and back to a commitment to mitigating the harm that we've done to the environment. I'm a big believer in green technology. North Carolina, this part of North Carolina, is high in poverty, and it was before COVID-19 arrived. I think the path forward is green technology. North Carolina ranks number 2 in the country in solar energy production. And this part of North Carolina, Western North Carolina, should be the epicenter for alternative energy for the East Coast. My wife and I are building a house, and hopefully next month we'll move in. We'll see. But we've installed solar and a solar battery and geothermal, and should be at least a net neutral, if not a net positive on energy. But those solar panels that are on our house, they were made in America, and that's a good thing, but they're not made here in Western North Carolina. So I would like to see green technology become the path forward, because it's good for the environment, it's good for the economy, and it's good for national security. If we become energy independent, we don't have troops sitting in the Middle East guarding pipelines. So I would like to see an expansion and extension of those federal tax credits that made, for me, installing solar and geothermal economically feasible. I would like to see those areas not just extended, those programs, but expanded and targeted on areas of high poverty, which includes the majority of the counties that make up the 17th or the 11th congressional district, the 17 counties in that district. A majority are above the national average in poverty. So if we could bring and revive and stoke green technology in this area, we could be manufacturing those panels here and distributing those up and down the East Coast and installing them here at home and making them economically feasible in those areas that right now are being hit by high poverty. Again, I think it's in our national security interest to become energy independent and to get off of carbon fuels. So I support the efforts to move away from carbon fuel, to impose a tax and to distribute the proceeds to everyone in the country, and to move us towards alternative energy and to become carbon neutral. I think we could do that by 2030. We put a man on the moon in less than a decade. I think we can achieve that independence from carbon fuel by 2030. And certainly I know others have said by 2050, but we've got to lean forward into that effort and provide the technology and the incentives to put us on that path and to achieve that objective that we need to achieve in order to preserve the beauty of this area that we live in. You've seen the folks running on the other side. It's still not clear who's going to be the Republican nominee to compete against me in November for the seat in Congress, but it's clear that either one of the candidates will be another carbon copy, to use the term, of Mark Meadows. And you've again seen over the past decade what the Republicans have done to try to roll back the clock on the environment in a number of areas. They've tried to roll back funding for the National Park Service, and that's an area that I intend to fight for. We're fortunate to have a large segment of national park and forest lands here in our area, and the efforts to decrease funding and to reduce the number of folks working for the Park Service is bad for Western North Carolina. This area is heavily dependent on tourism, and people come here to enjoy the beauty of the mountains, the beauty of our national parks, and I think we need to be increasing our investment in those, and we get a good return on that investment here in Western North Carolina, or at least we did before COVID-19 put a halt to tourism. But as we begin to recover, there's a substantial backlog of maintenance and repair in our national parks that has accumulated over a number of years. And so that's an area where I would like to see the federal government making an investment to get people back to work and to improve our national parks and to keep this area an area of beauty that people will want to come to for generations to come. So again, I thank you so much for all that you do to look after Western North Carolina, and not just Western North Carolina, but the country and the world, and to try to make it a better place and a livable place and a place that will continue to be habitable and enjoyable for many, many generations to come. So again, I'm Mo Davis. I'm running for the North Carolina 11th Congressional District seat, and I need your support. So please go to the website. It's Mo Davis, MOEDAVIS for Congress.com. And if you can donate, if you can volunteer, if you can help spread the word, it would be much appreciated. But again, a very happy Earth Day to you, to your friends, to your family. Be safe, and I look forward to the opportunity to see you in person.